going from let's say, traditional way of approaching to applications and writing and using the infrastructure, to a microservices model running on AWS platform on the cloud. So we needed to create a new deployment platform for Traiana, one that would be completely automatic and completely secured, but still operate as resilient and as robust as our applications in the on-premises used to work. So in the last 18 months, we've been working to make sure that the services themselves are as resilient and as secured, but we needed to do that in a whole new set of tools and new sets of vendors, third-party applications, and we had to learn some new skills. So the technological challenge was huge, but I think that the most challenging thing was not the actual application or security or whatever change that we needed to go through the technology level. We needed to create a new and robust applications with people that knows only the old traditional way. And this was the change that was really the revolutionizing. I think we took now a group that used to be very traditional in way of thinking, very manual, very mundane work, and created a new group that actually builds everything automatically, takes everything to a robust new world, and doesn't have to deal with the day-to-day basis anymore. Now they're dealing with some new innovative codes and new innovative ideas using SecDevOps, using cloud automations and cloud services that actually provides the ability to do things more automatically. When looking at the Traiana services now and then, Traiana now gives their clients a complete and robust platform already used by production environment by our sister company in the group called Abide for regulatory reporting in MiFID II. And now it's completely and ready for use of the entire banking systems and Tier 1 clients that we provide service for. Let's say that the same system administrator coming back to work today is now, first of all, starting with the coffee. He doesn't have to go through the regular process of checking the logs and the applications and hardware logs, et cetera. He now goes through thinking about the next Python script that he's going to write or the Chaos Monkey that he's now planning to implement into the system to making sure it's robust all the time. Small note, Traiana provides to global clients. The Israeli market does not know it very well, but Traiana provides messaging, allocation, and confirmation services for the Tier 1 banks, all kind of institutional financial institutions around the world, and now we can provide it on the cloud. Thank you.
Thank you, Noah. Now I want to introduce an old and a good friend of mine, Nir Valtman, the head of application security at Eitan, and NCR. Oh my God.
I'll speak from here.
Yeah, it's better. You're too high for me.
Yeah, I'm a bit tall. So yeah, thank you, Eitan. And of course, I'm heading the application security for NCR. How many of you are familiar with NCR? Less than half. Okay. So let me give you a quick intro about the company, and then we'll dive into what we do with regards to cloud security. So NCR is a Fortune 500 company, approximately $6.5 billion in revenue. Top 15 company in SaaS and PaaS. We have approximately 8,000 engineers, software engineers out of the 38,000 employees. And we run approximately 700 million transactions a day globally. So this is who NCR is. Now I hope that you're familiar with the company. If any of you are familiar with Retalix, this is one of those acquisitions that was made by NCR. So let me share with you a little bit about our business, and then we'll talk about how we actually leverage cloud. So NCR has 3 key divisions. One of them is retail, other one is hospitality, and last one is financial services, which is mostly applicable for here. So in retail, we have point of sales and back office systems and payment systems. I just saw, I live in Atlanta, and I just saw that there are pin pads in the stores, and I got so excited that I saw that there's a progress in payments here. So it was really great. There's also hospitality solutions where we sell to the burger places, we sell to hotels, and even when you do the checkout to your travel applications, that would be mostly us. But with regards to financial institutions and financial services, NCR is actually a financial institution in the States. We're regulated by FFIEC, and the reason for that is because we acquired a company called Digital Insight that actually, the main business of this company is that we make small banks and credit unions look like big banks. We have the mobile application, the front end, online banking, the business banking, and we also add some features on top of their small banking institutions, like we use Zelle for payments, and we do bill pay, stuff that usually small financial institutions don't have. And obviously we have ATMs, so go to most of the ATMs here, you probably find NCR's logo. So why am I here? NCR goes through a kind of big transformation, starting from about 5 years ago, and it goes towards 2020. We started from a hardware company. This is where the ATMs come from. This is where the point of sales come from. And then we started to shift into a software organization, which produces approximately 27% of our revenue today. And then by 2020, we plan to be a data company. In order to be a data company, you can't put your software on premise. You need to be somewhere in a centralized, consumable location. And this is the reason why we leverage cloud. So we developed or still developing a platform. We call it Omni-Channel Decision Support Platform. It's essentially a platform that relies on the cloud, but it's not a traditional cloud environment. Obviously, we also use cloud services, or microservices, as you mentioned as well. And we run mainly on IaaS, but we put the Kubernetes and Dockers on top of the IaaS. And actually, we have two reasons for that. One, it's easier to get the compliance with IaaS, from our perspective at least. And second of all, it's scalable, and we can just add more nodes in our Kubernetes cluster, which is essentially a software-defined network, if you think about it this way. And the second thing why it's so important for us in terms of security is because today, with all of the DevSecOps world, actually we deliver infrastructure as a service. We don't deliver just code. We deliver containers. And those containers obviously need to be secure. So we have the application security layer, but we also have the infrastructure underlying that, which again, we need to invest quite a lot in this. So long story short, my inputs today would be more focused on, of course, being a PaaS and SaaS provider, but also focused on software engineering and more business-related stuff to financial institutions, which is pretty much what we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Nir. Now for the last speaker, Yinon Costica. Don't stand up. For 3 minutes, 2 seconds. One of the talented in security field, starting from Talpiot, then to Adalom, and now in Microsoft as a Director PM on the Cloud Security Group.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm Yinon Costica, as said. So I'm now in Microsoft for doing, I'm in a group in Israel called the Cloud Security Group. I run 3 products, one for Azure Security, Azure Security Center. The other one is a Microsoft CASB, Cloud App Security. And the last one is for Identity, ATA/Azure ATP, which is a cloud version of ATA. These 3 products are the cloud security products of Microsoft to secure infrastructure, applications, and identities. Originally, I came from the Adalom acquisitions. How many of you are familiar with Adalom? Oh, that's nice.
More than people that know NCR.
It's still a brand. So Microsoft is always like naming products very funny, and I say the name of the product, Microsoft Cloud App Security, and then people look at me, and then I say Adalom, and then they say, oh, okay, and then it's like 1 year, 2 years, now 3 years after the acquisition, but it's still the case. So just a little anecdote. So again, going to Microsoft. So Microsoft was, as you know, Windows, Office. Years ago, a decade ago, Microsoft embraced the cloud. I don't know how many of you are familiar, but investments started to shift in Microsoft towards building, instead of Windows and Office apps, Azure and Office 365. This is a decade of investments of most of the engineering resources in Microsoft. And today, Microsoft is the leading cloud provider in the world in terms of revenues with these platforms. This, I think, Microsoft took a very early approach into a cloud-first, mobile-first environment, and we built what we thought organizations need and what organizations asked us to build in order to allow these digital transformations for our customers. And this is what brought us here. When we talk about finance services, so I actually collected some data out of the 8 too-big-to-fail insurers. So 7 out of the 8 already committed to Microsoft Cloud, and in the too-big-to-fail banks, 22 out of the top 26 are already committed to Microsoft Cloud. This is what actually makes us understand that the cloud is happening, and it's not different than other sectors in the market. It's a very important understanding. So coming from Adalom, so I'm in the cloud security business like 6 years now. In general, we saw customers saying no to cloud. Definitely no, no way. The next step was, well, this is necessary evil, and started implementing technologies that are cloud prohibitors, like cloud encryption gateways, etc. So we have to deal with the cloud, but let's do it in the least worst way to do that. But now we are hearing more and more customers, and I was very enlightened by hearing the regulators earlier this panel saying, okay, tell us how to do it right. We want to embrace the cloud, and that's what we hear throughout the market, and we're very happy to actually lead this process with the world. So this is one thing. In terms of security, so Microsoft is investing heavily in security. We have a very unique way to deliver security. Our approach is built on 3 pillars. The first one, and it was mentioned in terms of cloud data, we take, so we take what we call the intelligent security graph, and we make it into actionable insights for security. So as Nir said, in order to make data accessible, we need to put it in the cloud. That's what we did. And today, Microsoft has visibility into the most interesting security signal in the world, from machine compromised on Azure to spammers on Exchange Online, to infected devices and malware hashes, and to cloud applications that are rogue and malicious activities on them. So we're seeing all of this, and we're combining this to one very extensive intelligent security graph that we actually put in action to protect our customers, so we can identify threats before they happen. We also understand that while we're doing huge investment in security, and I can expand a bit about more of that later, but it takes a whole community, an ecosystem, in order to win. And this is why we are working with partners, one, to extend the intelligent security graph, but also with regulators and industries in order to make the best recommendations. And it was mentioned earlier, so I won't repeat it, how to really deploy cloud safely and how to enable this digital transformation. So that's the second thing that we're doing. And third, we are investing a lot in the platform. We deliver Azure and Office 365. We're doing a whole lot of security internally. So we have this shared responsibility model that we take very seriously. We are investing anything that we can in order to do security and compliance on behalf of our customers. So it means that we have red teams that was mentioned here that are doing continuous testing on our systems, trying to hack our own systems in order to learn and implement what we know in order to be one step ahead of attackers. Another thing that we are doing, we are taking all of the internal knowledge that we have, and whenever we cannot do that on behalf of the customer, for instance on identity and access, we actually make it available as tools to our customers. And this is what started 2 years ago, where Microsoft 3 years ago, when Microsoft did a chain of acquisitions, Adalom included, and released a portfolio of security that what we believe is now enabling most of the organizations to become digital, to go into the digital transformation by using the security tools they need as part of the platform. Not bolt-on, built-in, they are using it and they are able to move into the next step. In general, what we have 4 pillars: identity and access, information protection, the additional one is threat detection and protection, and the last one is security management for policy enforcement, as mentioned earlier in the regulator's form. Now, we do that in 2 ways. We have Microsoft 365, which is, how many of you are familiar with Microsoft 365? Wow, that's really good. Okay, so we had Office 365. Now we have all combined together into Microsoft 365, and we believe that this is what an individual needs in order to do more, in order to be productive in a cloud-first, mobile-first environment. And that's our solution there. It includes all of the security controls you need and the productivity you need in order to do that. The other area is Azure Data Center Security, so Azure Security Center, where we take all of the internal tools that we're using to deploy our own Azure infrastructure and services and are giving it to customers, so Azure Key Vault, Azure Security Center, Azure Monitoring, and so on, so customers can really use them and deploy their apps in the data centers, staying secure. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Yinon. Last week we had a conference call talking about the question, which I missed this call, unfortunately. But we closed about the subjects, and yesterday I changed it a little bit, okay? It will be nice, be spontaneous. So let's start. What is your personal and company views on the cloud adoption, and why financial institutions decide to adopt them? We start with Noah, since we are a gentleman with English manners.
Okay, so in the year 2015, we started seeing the regulators themselves moving to the cloud. MiFID II was, FCA moved MiFID II into the cloud in 2016. So I understand that the regulation is actually all for it. And now when we think about it and we think why they're all for it, it became a fact that if you work right, if you do it right, it could be cost effective. It could be from operational point of view, not just from the direct cost of the servers themselves, but from the total cost of ownership and the OpEx, the OpEx budget that you actually spent on a yearly basis. The second thing that I thought might be interesting was the security itself. Again, I agreed with Eli Petel that said before that you could do security on the cloud if you do it right. You could do it very well, and it could be much more secured. But the main difference between doing it on premises and doing it on the cloud is doing it transparently as much as possible. The amount of information that the cloud providers provide us for security is huge. You just need to know how to make it visible or make it effective or make effective decisions out of it. So the second reason to go to the cloud would be security. And also, I think the automation and as Traiana moved to microservices, it was the only option, moving to the automation, and the cloud provides us, like running Kubernetes. EKS in AWS is a new service that now runs Kubernetes for you. Other services are like that, and I think that cloud provides much more ability to run new tools and new set of services that are now open to the public and gets God knows how many services AWS provides in any given moment to the public, and being interesting to the public from as they say, they try to give you the service as soon as you ask it. They will be very responsive to client requests.
By the way, thank you. By the way, if you ask in my company Wix, what is better to store the data on a servers on-premise or in the cloud, all the people will tell you, cloud is better. We have more tools, we have more eyes, can handle it better. Yinon, the same question. Oh, maybe you want
I'll just add
Don't fight.
the containers part of the things. So the fact that you go to microservices and the fact that you go with containers, it allows you to run very rapidly. And the reason for that is because you can set up containers very, very easily on any laptop. You can run, test the whole infrastructure, and then just promote it to staging, production, whatever you have through your CI/CD pipeline. So the good thing about the cloud is, of course, security, and we can leverage managed services, which is great from my perspective, at least for compliance reasons, because we do security from the ground up. But yet, taking the container, applying all of the security practice on top of that, and then just promoting that to production, there is a huge difference into shifting left. And this is the most left you can take, except the IDE, which, obviously, we can talk about it separately. From a personal perspective, I think that, every startup company can run very fast to do that, regardless if it's a fintech company or, any other company. I think it's very good for financial institutions, and also challenging for them, because let's say small financial institutions or fintech companies, they don't necessarily have big teams, and they don't necessarily know what they want except what they have from the regulator. So given that fact and the fact that you can scale up security and set it up pretty quickly, I think it's a very big benefit in the cloud.
So obviously I'm all for cloud. I have to mention this
EC2?
audience.
AWS?
Actually, in Adalom, we used the AWS, and when we moved to Microsoft, we migrated the whole service to Azure.
I wonder why.
So whoever wants to ask about migrating from AWS to Azure, I have a lot of experience. Ask me later. But kidding. But my own personal experience actually was coming from 8200, so we were not connected to the internet or any cloud, of course. And then I came into Adalom, and I started just working from anywhere, any device. And this was like the enlightening experience of, wow, okay, the amount of productivity for the good and for the bad, that I can work from my mobile phone anywhere, anytime. It was like the shocking moment, aha moment, but I think that everybody should be able to do that, to do more. In terms of why moving to the cloud, so there are equivalents to any vertical. So in banking, they called it immersive banking and intelligent banking, but you have the same thing like in every single vectors and in vertical, and this is the reason why to do that. So first, be quick, be agile, and be able to do together, to collaborate with other partners, vendors, ISVs, customers on your data. The second thing is the intelligence, and this is critical. The same way I mentioned about the intelligent security graph. So moving into the cloud allows organizations to do, and we have examples, use cases in Microsoft on how to do, for instance, fraud analysis in the cloud based on big data queries and interactive queries to other vendors and third parties, only because you run in the cloud. So of course, making your banking decisions more intelligent, leveraging the cloud, that's the second thing. And security, I totally agree. I think that, and to give an example, because I don't want to repeat, GDPR, everybody probably heard about it, but we have two products, one for cloud GDPR and one for on-premise data discovery and detection. Both of them are, it's Azure Information Protection, but this is where customers needed to run Azure, like on all of their SharePoint on-prem, all of their on-prem servers, this tool set. And in the cloud, it was a single policy. So this is where customers are saying, okay, we should definitely move more into this single location. And this is an example of how customers can be more compliant, more secure, where it's centralized and you have more eyes and controls.
Thank you. Great example.
Two more things to say. Nir, you mentioned the Kubernetes. How much time did it take you to actually implement the thing?
Depends what. Like spinning up the cluster, or just,
It's very simple.
Yeah.
It takes a very short learning curve
it
to learn the
depends.
technology.
I think it depends, because if you want to spin up a multi-region environment and you want to have the high availability and you want to make sure that you have the right persistence layers, let's say Hadoop, you duplicate your Hadoop into multiple locations. Let's say it's not a day, but it's closer to a sprint. But if you want to add the compliance on top of that, that would be approximately, easy 30 to 45 days.
Yes, but the implementation itself and the first learning curve is amazing in the cloud. You have new services running on the cloud. You now have the time to check it. And the next couple of days are just being implementing, as you say, robust and high availability as much as you can. I think that the main reason financial institution would want to move to the cloud is the short learning curve.
Yeah, and the POCs with Kubernetes, which is, it's essentially an orchestrator, right? But fact is that with Kubernetes, you can actually implement a lot of controls. You can automate everything you do with Kubernetes. For instance, one of the things that we're looking at is how to disable SSH on the containers. We don't need anyone to connect via SSH into our containers, which is, a revolutionary thing if you think about, connecting into instances. And yet, if you really want to play with that, you can download Minikube, which is a project of open source Kubernetes. Well, Kubernetes is open source, but it's about 2 hours from start to end to spin up a cluster with everything you need, and then you can start playing with the security. Just keep in mind that Minikube doesn't have all of the security features enabled like in Kubernetes, nor OpenShift. So that would be the commercial version of Kubernetes.
Thank you. You convinced me. So we can close the session. No. Second new question, it's about the key requirements presented by fintech customers, and how do you address them? Want to start?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Yinon.
Okay, so as a platform, so let's start. I think that the regulators stated it before. So what's most important? So it starts with compliance. 3 areas to this compliance. One, are you compliant? That's the first thing. Second thing is data residency and regional considerations. And the third thing is data security in general. So secret management, encryption, who has access to the data. These are the 3 areas that we see around the compliance. This is the blockers. These are the blockers before anybody can do anything. In terms of compliance, so obviously we have this is part of what we do. So Microsoft has a very broad compliance. We are doing it both globally, but also regionally. So we even have Israeli compliance and Singapore compliance. So we have discussions with the local regulators in order to make our platform compliant for them. In terms of regions, so this is something that what we can do, we can deploy Azure and make it available in every region. We can even make it what we call a sovereign, like a managed Azure instance, like we're doing for the federal government and in other locations. But this allows customers to really deal with the data in a regional manner that doesn't take the data out. And by that, they can overcome many of the complexities around like geo issues. That are very interesting. Also, I heard, I think it was Petel that talked about it. Yeah, so this was super interesting to hear it from the regulator's point of view. And the last thing is data security. Here, I think there was a lot of misconception. I talked to you about it earlier, like let's start with encrypting everything. Well, this doesn't really work. The problem is if you encrypt everything, you actually break the data, and in many cases, you lose most of the benefits of the cloud. So what we're seeing more and more, and this is really good, that controls like bring your own key and Key Vault, like secret management, Azure Key Vault. I'm not sure what's the equivalent in AWS, but cloud providers are providing the ability to manage your keys, bring your own keys, and then you own the access to the data and you have monitoring on it. And we're seeing more and more organizations, definitely financials, but the good thing is that everybody starts to use it more, so data becomes, in general, more secured, not only financials, but especially financials. And this is what we provide. So obviously, once you integrate with such a service, you can encrypt your data in storage, in SQL, in all the passes and data stores that you have on your cloud platform. And this addresses the third thing. I have more, like data security, like threat detection and advanced threat detection, et cetera, but these are the blockers.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I definitely agree on the points that you mentioned. I think that there are a few additional things that financial institutions look at. One of them is multi-tenancy. Similarly, as we, as customers of cloud providers, looking at multi-tenancy and cloud provider attacks or insider data exposure, not attacks. So similarly, obviously, our customers look at us and ask, how do we do multi-tenancy? How do we protect their data? Obviously, if there's privacy concerns, they ask us to address that. So this is definitely one of the things. The other thing is if we use a PaaS, more questions pop up because they want to know how actually we utilize PaaS. When IaaS, we have much more control over it. With PaaS, we have less control. It's usually not exactly our data, although in the cloud we can't really say it's our data. But in PaaS, we're just being asked more about how do we use that. Therefore, by definition, we don't use much of the PaaS. Usually, it would be more towards persistence layers or streaming analytics, and less for the rest. I would put it this way.
I think when I used to work in insurance companies, and when I think about what they needed as a client, I think that detailed audit information. I myself work as a VP Information Services. I always work on audits. So whenever I have the information that I can provide the auditors and give them as much transparency as possible, I think that will be probably answering some of the security departments in the financial institutions. I would also think that they will be interested, as part of the implementation on the cloud, use the cloud assets and do as much as immutable environment as possible that will actually reduce the attack surface and reduce the number of errors made by man. And I think that if you try and look on the way that we used to do things and now how we do it now, I think that the main difference that would interest the institutional, the financial institution will be the fact that we can assure them that we didn't touch their data.
Yeah, and I think that you mentioned a very interesting point about logging, right? In hybrid cloud environments, when you log into your SIM, you will log into your SIM on the on-premise solutions, you would log on-premise. On the cloud solutions, where would you log? In the cloud. But then you need to consider the cost of taking all of these logs and shifting them on-prem or egress or ingress. So you definitely need to take this consideration into account, definitely, because at the end of the day, that may be a quite big expense on data. Just to shift information that you cannot correlate very easily between the environments.
Thank you. You can do a small water break. What is mostly missed by companies when migrating into the IaaS, PaaS, or SaaS models?
So from my experience, when you work on a multi-tenant environment, the main concern is in cost. And when you talk about cost, is the fact that you cannot break the cost of the service to small portions or relatively to the client portions. So I think one good management tool to do costs and also to be able to granularly check the service, let's say, points within the service will be a good starting point from that perspective. I would also think about another very important point. You just talk about log chipping, and we are using ELK, some of the ELK solutions that are out there in the market. And I'm always thinking about the way that they do the security. And I'm also concerned about this. How do you make sure that your third-party vendors are completely secured as you are.
Yinon, please.
So I agree with everything. I think that the three things just to say, I think visibility is one thing that is overlooked many times. This is critical. Visibility, we call it, so it has many, many layers. The ease and the agility of starting a service in the cloud. So there are many solutions that talk about visibility, but essentially in the SaaS layer, we call it Shadow IT discovery, that you need at least to know what your users are doing. So you mentioned like the ELK, different like third-party solutions. Problem is that someone might have started using it, but nobody knows about it, and then you simply don't know. You need to discover that, and that's one of the at the SaaS level. That's one thing that you need to do. The other thing, even within your, we call it shadow within the sanction. So you have your Azure environment or AWS environment, but you don't really know what was pinned in that environment. So what's a VM? Who's using it? Is it does it have an RDP port open externally or not? So the visibility into all of these different resources, this is a must-have. The second thing is a very strong, after the visibility, very strong policy enforcement mechanism. It was mentioned earlier on, but have the right baselines. Over time, the good thing about policy enforcement that less and less humans are touching production environments and data. This is amazing. It's great. It means that everything. Actually, it's funny because this is, I think, the only thing that dev and security would agree on. So DevSecOps is like in the center. Everybody agrees that this is better. Devs need to do less, just automate, and security are happy because everything is automated. So DevSecOps is amazing, and the less you touch your environment, the better it is for everyone. And this is thanks to visibility and policy enforcement. Cost is something very important. You mentioned it, but predictive cost, many customers start something. Actually, an acquisition in Israel, CloudDay, I don't know if you're familiar, but it's called Azure Cost Management. But the ability to know how much you're spending and to economize efficiently on that is critical and overlooked many times. Last but not least, I just have to say many solutions, security solutions, so organizations look to extend their existing solutions. The good thing about cloud, and it was mentioned throughout, cloud is a single point. It's like the tipping point where customers review, revisit their entire paradigm and technology. So this is a point where they're saying, okay, should we do something different? In many cases, they say yes, and they change the way they do that. That's great. It's always good to revisit and have the opportunity to do that. And the other thing that I think is overlooked, many times solutions that are already existing and they are claimed to be hybrid, they don't really, and I said it earlier, I usually say it like, it's not a bolt-on, you need it built in. So you don't need a checkbox, yes, it can support cloud. It needs to be built for a cloud environment. It's super critical and very often overlooked. So whatever solution you're extending that are hybrid, so you head on-prem and you're moving to the cloud, take the opportunity to actually revisit and make sure it's suitable.
Yeah, and for those that still decide to go with the hybrid environment, I think we'll touch the cost in a second because I think that all of us agree with that. But with regards to asset management, you know, with on-prem solutions, it's okay. You can have your asset management software. You may even have an agent on the cloud and collect that as well. But at the end of the day, your data may be stored on a persistent layer that is a platform as a service. And then you don't have this asset, but there are the keys to the kingdom. At the end of the day, this is where the sensitive data is, and management of databases, it's a big hurdle. So therefore, I see a big value in running PaaS. So asset management in hybrid environment, that would be the first key point. The other one, with regards to cost, and it's not necessarily related to predicting the cost, it's more related to the business model. Because if you think about it and you develop a SaaS or a platform, whatever you develop, at the end of the day, if you go with a platform, your margins will be lower, period. If you go with IaaS solution, it will be lower. it will be a higher margin. So when you think about migrating to the cloud, you should think about the numbers that you want to make. Would it be more cost effective to develop your own thing and put it on IaaS? And today it's easy with all of those containers. Or utilizing PaaS and running very quickly, but then you will compromise on the profits or the margins that you're going to see down the road.
Thank you. Yinon, you talk about clouding, yeah? Can you please elaborate a little bit on them? It's very important, I think.
So of course, so in Azure, so it's now in Israeli Development Center as well. So we built Azure Cost Center that you can actually optimize your costs and see what are the optimizations you can do to actually economize in general on Azure. I think that this is critical for enterprise customers as they move. I think just to say a bit more about the transition in cloud, maybe how we see that. Organizations, AWS and other cloud platforms, so they started bottom up, right? The shift, and it's the same thing that happened with other like Salesforce, right? Business units took like a decision to use that, and then it became shadow IT, and then it became sanctioned IT after the fact. I think what's different with, again, from my perspective, and I'm putting like the Adalom head for a second, I really think that with Microsoft, what happens is a top-down process where IT adopts like Office and Azure, and now they're starting to roll it out to the organization. Where IT, top level, corp level, look at it, they looks at how to manage cloud, then cost becomes like a critical factor. It's not a business unit decision anymore. It's like a corp level monitoring issue, like compliance. They want to have full visibility into that and optimize across the entire company. I think it's great. That's what we do, and it's important for organization to just keep that in mind.
Thank you. Okay, how does your company leverage the concept of DevSecOps in the cloud? Noah, starting you?
Yes. So we have a complete CI and a complete CD, and our CI, it's actually one of the problems, we now discuss the challenges when implementing. So when moving to microservices, you find it hard to find the right, let's say, tools to do a complete CI. But we did, and we now have a complete set of stations that the developer goes through, including checking both the code from security code analysis and from static code analysis, all the way to checking the actual Docker environment and checking the image himself. And we also have, since we are working on a baking factory and we use images to deploy the rolling upgrades over the environment, we do also check the AMIs, the images themselves, by using the tools that AWS provides, Inspector. So I think there is a good usage in the tools that actually the cloud providers provide themselves, but I think there are some lackings there around the actual way that code is written within microservices and the tools themselves.
I think the best way to describe that from our perspective is that security should not be a speed bump. It should be a security camera. And this is the approach that we've taken. We should be very fast. We should follow the speed that our engineering go through. And this is pretty much, how we work together. So we definitely set up all of those, basic foundations that can or cannot, depends on the product, break the build if needed. So obviously static code analysis, dynamic analysis, and interactive application security testing. We look for third-party libraries, vulnerabilities, and obviously the licenses that are associated with them, just to make sure that we don't deploy with the GPL or stuff like that. And lastly, we also do container security. And all of that is actually executed as part of the CI/CD pipeline. There are things that can be done even better if you think about it. Not only introducing the security tools into the process, and I'll talk in a minute about the container security because it's very sexy thing to talk about. But you can actually take it one step further. There is a product called HashiCorp. And they do, they can assist with the deployment. They can definitely, run performance testing, a lot of stuff that are not necessarily related to security. But if you think about integrating some security tests like authentication, authorization checks, they can actually take this approach forward and actually interact with the business logic of the application and not only, statically or dynamically from a best practices perspective. From a container security standpoint, the way that it works for us is that developers can run a security check against our policy. And those developers, before they even introduce the code or push it through the CI/CD pipeline, they can just check if that will pass the policy. Because if it will not pass the policy, it will just not promote the image into even staging, which is, we apply all of the security practices right from the beginning. So checking that is one thing. There are obviously different best practices that you can take with containers that you not necessarily can take with IS in general. One of them is, for instance, having a read-only image, or a not privileged image, because you don't want to be able navigating from the container to the operating system itself. So there are a lot of controls that you can take in place. There's one interesting feature as well. You can actually do machine learning or profiling on the container to understand which process is running there, and then export that from the staging environment after you run your tests, and then import that into production. And next time that someone will try to run an RCE, for example, he will not be able to execute that because even any simple command, like even uname that you didn't run on the container on the testing phase, will not run. So you can really lock down the environment in a very good way that will just prevent attacks that we heard of, including API keys that are usually exposed in environment variables. You can even encrypt that. At least, segregate that from the host. There are ways to improve that yet. So that's my input. Thank you.
So there are the users. They're saying it's true. I actually have all of my products were CI/CD fully provisioned. And I have one product that is on premises, and it feels like the Stone Age every time that I need to deal with a release for that product. So this is like how I see that, and it's amazing what we can do with CI/CD. I'll talk about the security aspects of it. We're seeing, again, I said before, humans should not touch production in any sense. Everything should go back to CI/CD. The only thing that should run in production is the application and the monitoring and the behavioral engines to learn if there is something wrong that happens in that environment in case it was breached. That's the only things that need to happen in production as I see that. That's how we operate. And the more you said shift left, I think that the best thing that happened to coding in general is a shift left, that security, dev, everybody can move from that point where we write the code. And I can talk a lot about Microsoft perspective there. We just acquired GitHub, right? So it's from code, the source control that we use through the provisioning process. How do we actually compile the code, test it, cred scanner, look for credentials to make sure there are no credentials in the code because it was written by humans, right? Automatically test for it, provision it to the environment, and then monitor it also in the post-deployment against policies and security checks that are applied. All of this is amazing, should be used by everyone. It's, there is no parameter where it's not better than on-premise.
Thank you. I have some jokes about GitHub and Microsoft, but I will do it in private.
No criticism about GitHub and Microsoft, please.
Any question from the audience for these three speakers? Yes. I hardly hear you.
Can you speak up?
Give me a sticker. I think you had the Madonna.
Okay. Hi. I'm from Canada. We're doing encryption for the cloud. My question is about bring your own keys. we heard this, a lot of people talk about this model, and we wonder what the actual security benefit that you see in bring your own keys model, besides the marketing value of offering such a solution. Because once you bring your own keys to the cloud providers, you no longer have the keys. So how do you look at that?
So the question was related to whether bringing your own key would be beneficial or not, right? That's the focus of the question. So from our perspective, I think it should be considered both ways. If you're doing innovation and you just need to check the box, just store the key in the cloud provider if you don't see much sensitive data there. However, if you're going through a scalable environment, something that you'll need to explain to your customers, yes, marketing, right? This is definitely something that you'd like to do. But I think that it's not only marketing, it's about a risk that its severity may be low, but at the end of the day, the risk is that the cloud provider, and I'm not saying Microsoft does it, I'm just saying a typical or theoretical, allegedly, should be able accessing your data if they have the key. And it doesn't matter even if you store it on their HSM, and it doesn't matter what controls you put in place, as long as they own the hardware, you are at risk of them accessing your data. Whether it happens or not, everything is allegedly.
Okay, I think we're out of time.
We have refreshments outside, guys. Unless there is okay, if somebody has another questions, I think the speakers will be outside answering ones, and we want to move on because we have refreshment outside, and in 15 minutes we're going to start